Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Dude Therapist. We are so blessed and honored to have Dr. Lucky on. As you know, one of my original episodes on season 2 of the show, we are now on season 6, is my infertility journey with my wife, where it's the first time my wife has been on the show and the only episode that she has listened to of my show. So I'm super honored and excited to have you on because this is such a personal topic. Not just for me, but so many people nowadays. And you hear over and over again, infertility, IVF, and these words are thrown out. So before we get started, Dr. Lucky, can you introduce yourself to the listeners so they get a taste of who you are and the expertise that you bring as one of the leading doctors in this field?
For sure. Thank you, first of all, for having me on your show. I love everything that you do. I think mental health is such a huge component of how I help patients deal with infertility. So you're the perfect person for me to be collaborating with and talking to. I'm Dr. Lucky Sekhon. I'm a double board certified OB-GYN and reproductive endocrinologist and infertility expert. And so what that means is I learned all of the OB-GYN things I'm supposed to know in my training, but I also subspecialize where I focus really on understanding reproductive health, hormones, and all of the different ways that that can affect our fertility and all the different components of infertility that we can overcome with various treatment options. So I work at RMA of New York, which is a pretty busy fertility practice based in New York City. And I'm also the author of The Lucky Egg. This is a fertility Bible, so to speak. It's like a guidebook that basically helps people understand everything they need to know about their bodies, even if they're not trying, just to kind of mentally prepare the things that they need to know before starting to try, when to look for help, where to find the best help, what are the tests, what are the treatments, and when you have problems, how do you troubleshoot? So it covers pretty much everything one should need to know. And I'm really excited because it's coming out January 13th.
Yeah. You know, it's so interesting that there's so many Bibles of topics throughout history, whether it's from what to expect when expecting about parenting. You have, you know, this person talk. This is like the first one of its kind. Why has it taken so long?
By a fertility doctor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why has it taken so long? Because especially, I think they were waiting for your name because like, how could you like, Lucky Egg, it's the perfect title. It's so packed with just that punch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it
makes no sense
shocking to me. And I really didn't set out to become an author. This was a very organic journey for me because everything I've done outside of patient care has been something that I was doing as part of a solution to a very obvious problem. So I started blogging and making posts on social media in COVID because a lot of people were confused and isolated. It delayed their fertility treatment journey. People then were really confused about the COVID vaccine. There were rumors about how it could impact fertility, which I debunked a lot of that. And it was kind of something that I was just using as a megaphone for things that on a mass scale, I wanted to educate the public about and use my expertise. And then I started applying that to all the different topics within fertility medicine. And I found myself growing frustrated with how fragmented the grid is. You know, people would be DMing me all the time. Do you have a post on this or do you have a post on that? Even my blog, like there's only so much you can do to organize it. So I think to have a comprehensive one-stop shop that really walks you through things in a logical, sequential way, that doesn't exist. And even the attempts that have been made to write fertility guidebooks mostly have been written by people that they themselves went through maybe infertility treatment, but they're not actual true experts. And that's why I always say I didn't set out to write this book. It demanded to be written.
That's such a good tagline, but I love that so much because it's so important. I know for my wife and I, we started this whole idea of 10 years ago. My daughter's 7, my son is 3.5. We've had multiple failed transfers, the whole journey, right?
Yeah.
I never heard of PCOS. My wife has PCOS. I never heard of fertility in men until 10 years ago. I was sitting at a panel discussion with a Jewish organization, having a weekend conversation with 4 couples. 3 out of the 4 were men's issues, not women's issues. And I went, what is this, you know, malarkey ridiculousness? It's a women's issue. This has nothing to do with me. Well, it did. It was my wife and I both had fertility issues. So we get to join in that blame and no one gets to blame the other person. It's their fault. We both have our stake in the matter. But
Yeah.
I've felt, and I wanted to hear your take, the last 10 years, the conversation has been ramping up. That before, maybe because I wasn't in tune to it, I didn't hear about it, but I feel like there's just a lot more noise for good. Like the conversation, why? Why is it just all of a sudden, boom, everyone's like, oh, infertility, let's talk about it, IVF, insurance company, all these things now are just, what changed?
Well, I think people became fed up and felt, isolated, alone in a problem that's actually quite common. It's because our biology, at baseline, our biology is very inefficient when it comes to human reproduction. And also there's societal shifts. A lot of us are waiting longer to start building our families, and it's not something that's a choice. It's something about when you're, financially stable and ready and feel good in a good spot with your career, also finding the right partner. So many things have shifted, and personally that has led to a change in when people are starting their families. And because of the biological clock, that's also contributing definitely to more and more people needing a little bit of help to get there, or sometimes a lot of help, depending.
Yeah.
And there's also a huge conversation now about fertility preservation as a result, because people are recognizing the need to think ahead and to understand what the tools are that are available to help them navigate this complicated issue, because our biology hasn't shifted, but society has in a lot of ways. And that mismatch has led to a lot more conversation about this. And I think it's coming from a really great place that people are starting to share with their inner circles, and those conversations are getting bigger. Thanks to social media, it's really helped this become a much more mainstream conversation, because people have put themselves out there, and like yourself, and have said, hey, I'm going to be vulnerable, because you never know who it's helping. And I think it helps a lot of people.
Yeah. The one of the reasons I started posting about it was that my wife had a built-in support of women who either have been pregnant, have given birth before, and secretly have had miscarriages, fail this, fail that, struggles, and I had no one. I literally could not talk. My father, even, my mom and dad had 2 miscarriages between my brother and I. And I said, hey, I need to talk to you about the emotions. I said, how do you deal with it? He goes, we did. That was the answer. We did. Not anything more. And my dad is a beautiful man. I love him to pieces. Not his strong suit. So I started posting, I started posting for men. And I got so many messages. I remember vividly someone coming to me and my wife on a weekend and was crying. Some of my parents' age said, I wish someone like you, and Ariella, that's my wife's name, would have talked about things more, because I felt so alone 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Right.
And when you're in the, before we started recording about the mental health, and even now, right, you're in the field of not just biology, but also the emotions at people's most vulnerable moments. What emotional struggles around fertility do you see the most? And how do you handle that as the doctor, trying to be not just the logical side of like the plan? How do you do both? How do you handle that as an individual?
Well, I think the biggest emotion that I see people struggle with is this feeling of shame, feeling like their body's broken, that it's not able to do something that should be very innate and natural. There's also a lot of feelings of comparison, and comparison is the thief of joy. Like people feeling like they're left behind. They're not meeting all the milestones that their counterparts, maybe friends that they graduated college and got jobs, and a lot of firsts, they maybe got married around the same time. But I think feeling left behind as they see their peers moving on to life's next chapters. And along with that comes a loss of their identity and a loss of self-trust in their body, especially in people that are, high achievers, that are used to this idea of everything being a meritocracy, and the amount of effort you put in equals the amount product or result that you get out of something. I mean, fertility is just not something that works that way. It can be very unfair. And I think along with all of that, the loss in, what you expected and how you thought things would work out, and the fact that there could be a lot more twists and turns than anticipated, I think people have a lot of grief that they carry around as a result of that. I think for me, as a fertility expert, it's important to not just say, okay, I'm here to deal with the physical, and like you can talk to a therapist about your mental health. I think we have to acknowledge the huge role that your mental health, and therefore resilience, and being able to kind of stick with the plan and have healthy coping mechanisms. I think all of that is part of the treatment that we should be helping our patients navigate, because truthfully, a lot of this is about persistence paying off. And it's very hard for some people who are struggling mentally to stick with the journey. And there is this concept of prematurely dropping out of treatment, which studies have shown the number one reason is not what people would assume, financial, right? Or resource restrictions. It's about the psychological burden and stress.
Yeah.
I try to remind my patients that you can feel all the different things all at once. You can feel grief, and you can also remain hopeful about the future. And I don't think you have to resolve the grief before moving forward and having positive emotions or feelings of hope. And I think we just have to kind of redefine the story and narrative that a lot of people are told growing up and the thought process that they have, because I think that no one, grows up and says, okay, one day I'm probably going to have infertility, right? Most people feel pretty blindsided by it. So it's about giving people the tools to cope and the tools to build their resilience so that they can get through this, not just to a successful outcome, but ideally with their sense of self and their relationships and their quality of life intact.
Because I know for me, I'm an Orthodox Jewish. I know RMA is a huge hub for a lot of Jewish couples, Jewish doctors. Right. And, I was always just told, like, hey, you get married, you have sex, baby.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in a clinic, the doctor going through the statistics, the numbers, the reality check of how hard it is for healthy, fertile couples to have kids without any fertility issues. And I sat there and I went, that's not true. That's a myth. Like, you're lying, right? So what are some of the myths about fertility and maybe infertility that maybe in your book or even in the work that you do as one of the experts in this field, can we kind of dispel and just put out there to go, hey, here's the truth, because you've been told a magical story that is nice, but it's a fantasy and it's Disney and not reality.
Yeah, I'll throw out, 3 or 4 examples of ones that come up all the time. One is what you already mentioned, that fertility is a female problem. And I think that narrative exists because of the biological clock. Everyone knows women are born with all the eggs they're ever going to have. Most people know that. And that the ovaries and the eggs lack repair mechanisms. So a lot of infertility can stem from or be contributed to by getting older and having a harder time ovulating a healthy egg. Men are always making new sperm every 74 days. So there is this idea of invincibility, but we know that they're not guaranteed to all have perfect quality sperm, and you can have problems with production or transport of the sperm. There's a lot of things that can go wrong on both the male and female side. And 50% of couples with infertility will have a male factor involved in that. And I think that that is shockingly shocking to people when you consider that it takes 2 components to come together. But a lot of people really put more emphasis on egg health and, female fertility more so than male. And it's really important because getting tested on the male side is actually a cheap and somewhat easy, non-invasive test, and it can give you so much information. So all too often people are like, let me do things in a stepwise way, and it's probably a female problem, so let's do her testing first, and then I'll get tested if I have to. But really, everyone should be getting tested concurrently to avoid wasting time. Another big one is that if you lead the healthiest lifestyle possible, you eat clean, you do all the right things, you will not have any issues getting pregnant. And we know that not being able to get pregnant and difficulty with fertility sometimes has nothing to do with your lifestyle or something that you did or didn't do. Sometimes it could be a mechanical blockage. It could be things that are just well beyond your control. It could be things that come down to your genetics. Of course, lifestyle can play a role in how we optimize our body and show up to certain challenges and try to be the best version of ourselves. And we should all be working on those things. But you not being able to get pregnant or running into a problem isn't something that, okay, you could have fixed it if you had done X, Y, Z differently. And I think that that comes down to the self-blame and the shame that a lot of people feel. It's not your fault. A big one that comes up a lot also is surrounding the idea of your egg count, because there are ways to objectively evaluate a person's egg count, whether it be through an ultrasound or an AMH level, which is a blood test. A lot of people incorrectly assume that these are fertility tests. But at the end of the day, what I explain to them is it's nice to know how many eggs you have available, because women are born with a finite number and we lose them throughout our life. And really and truly, the only main reasons why it matters is if push comes to shove and you need to do IVF or you decide you want to freeze eggs, both of those processes look the same. The first step is stimulating your ovaries and accessing whatever eggs we can get to and extracting them. And the more eggs you work with, the more efficient that process is. But aside from that, when you're ovulating on your own, and this is all happening in your own body and you're trying to time things and try, you're only releasing one egg each month. So your egg count doesn't actually define your fertility. It only can really affect your fertility in the extreme if it falls below a critical threshold, which it does for everyone eventually at some point in their lives. Then you go into menopause and your ovaries stop being able to release eggs. And if you're not ovulating, you're not in the game. So beyond a certain point, yes, your egg count can impact your fertility. But in general, people fixate way too much on numbers and think that that's going to help or harm them when they're trying on their own. And I would say everyone's on a level playing field when it comes to ovulating one egg each cycle.
I remember.
So those are like three big ones.
No, and I love those. And it's so important for everyone to even just pick up this book to get those basic information out of the way. Don't Google, don't ChatGPT, get from an expert, please, because there's so much information out there that is not true. From personal experiences are individualized. And just because a Facebook group person says this happened or, some blog doesn't mean that actually will be your story or your journey. So just be cognizant of that when you're looking for information. I remember when we were at that stage of trying to retrieve eggs and the doctor came out and said, you have 20 something, 30 something eggs.
Yes.
And in the end, I think we had after genetic testing, all these things, we ended up having 19. I remember the same day, someone in the thing had 2. Mm-hmm. And the stark difference of hope and happiness felt the same for both couples. Oh my gosh, we have 2. We thought we would have 0. And us going, wow, we have 30 something. Yeah. We're so lucky. That idea of hope is so exciting. How do you help the couple balance the idea of what could be and hope and that in between of that reality so we can set the expectations? How do you set expectations for couples when there is so much hanging in the balance of this is either we're going to have a family and live those dreams that we expect, or we're going to be crushed and not have a family? How do you find that in between?
I try to help first off, I start off with the facts. I talk about stats and averages and what to expect based on the information that we have. But I also acknowledge that there's a lot that you can't predict and we don't have a crystal ball. And until you go through it, one of the hardest things about IVF is that until you go through the process, you don't really know what to expect because everyone's an individual. And certain things like egg quality don't have an objective test like egg quantity. And so you're making a lot of assumptions, and those assumptions may ring true or they may not because everyone's an individual. They're not a stat written on paper. And so I think giving people a framework of what to expect so they're not going into a situation blindsided, like thinking every egg is a baby, right? Because we know it takes so many eggs to fertilize, turn into embryos. And for some people, that conversion rate can be great. And for others, it can be lower than expected. I think setting expectations, being really clear with what knowledge we do have, but also leaving wiggle room to say, hey, these are the massive unknowns and things that could be variable and we're not going to know. And I think acknowledging that is really important. It's one of the reasons I named my book The Lucky Egg. Of course, it's a play on my name, right? Being unique. But at the end of the day, I think as a scientifically minded person, as a physician in a field that is very scientific, it is so important to acknowledge to patients that there are still things we can't predict. There's still things we cannot control. And there is an element of luck and serendipity. This is, the explanation for why someone could have a bunch of failed cycles and think, oh my gosh, there's no way I'll ever get pregnant on my own. Forget about that. I'm past that now. And sometimes it still happens, in between cycles. And there's no explanation of why someone would be, down to the point where they're not able to carry and they're using a surrogate, they're going down that pathway and then they conceive on their own. I mean, those stories can be triggering to people because they're like, it can give false hope. But I do see things like this happen. And I try to think of it not as a negative, but as a positive that you just never know. And as much as we should use science and rely on the data, and rely on experts, we also have to leave a little bit of room for that unknown and be comfortable and be able to sit with that discomfort. And I think a big thing about this is just understanding that patients, when they go through this, are in a constant state of hypervigilance and anxiety. And it's about trying to help them find ways to work through that, right? You can't feel like your whole life is on pause until you solve this problem. You have to find a way to keep living your life and finding a source of joy and, maintaining your identity and moving through this challenge in your life, because it's not a sprint. Often it's a marathon for many people.
I want to talk to the parents listening right now. If you love your partner but feel like after kids, everything got harder, it's not your fault. It's actually pretty normal. I wrote a book, From I Do to We Do, because couples don't get warned about the resentment, the invisible workload, the fights that escalate way too fast, and the disconnect that sneaks in. The book is part real life, part therapist brain, with tools to fight better, reconnect deeper, and actually feel like a team again. Because parenting should feel like us versus the chaos, not me versus you. From I Do to We Do is available now. Order at EllieWeinsteinLCSW.com. Yeah. Ooh, I love that. And when I want to go a little back for a second before, and we'll get into the emotions in a little bit about the couple and how to help couples and men and that side of it. But to back up a little bit, where is the difference between, hey, we're whatever in a long-term relationship or we want to have a kid, we should start testing, versus, oh my gosh, we have to test no matter what, and free. Where's the balance of let's try naturally, let's figure it out like every other couple, and then if things don't work at a certain point, maybe what is that point of when you start being concerned, versus freaking out, oh my gosh, we have to do it no matter what, we're not even going to try yet until we have all information.
I would say, the most logical approach is that it makes sense to start trying on your own, provided you have a regular period and you feel confident that you know how to track your cycle. Like if there are things that are confusing or you're not getting a regular cycle, it doesn't make sense to really try on your own for too long, because I think it takes at least 3 months to understand what's going on with your cycle once you start intentionally tracking, because a lot of people don't, and then they do once they start trying. Or maybe they're coming off of birth control and they don't know what their true ovulation pattern is. So once you have at least 3 months worth of data, if that interval between periods is irregular, you should just come see a fertility doctor from the get-go. At least start with a conversation with your OB-GYN / go straight to a fertility doctor. Because if you're not ovulating or you don't know when you're about to ovulate, then you're kind of not in the game, because there's really only a 2 to 3 day window in the lead up to ovulation that is high yield and makes sense to even try for the purpose of getting pregnant. So that's the first thing. If you have a regular cycle and you're able to kind of track things, you can use apps, you can use ovulation predictor kits, but you're able to time your attempts around ovulation. Then I would say if you're under 35, you could take for up to a full year of trying, because human reproduction is inefficient. And every month, even in your 20s, it's like, okay, 20% chance each month. You need multiple shots on goal to get there often. Now, if you're 35, approaching 35 or older than 35, don't wait longer than 6 months, because as we get older, there's a higher chance of ovulating an unhealthy egg. And there's a higher risk of having cycles where even though you timed everything correctly, it doesn't happen because that embryo that formed is missing or has extra DNA. Or there's even a higher risk of things like miscarriage. So by the time we get to 40, we say don't wait longer than 3 months. So it's really about the time you've been trying. But I would fast track someone to see a professional like myself earlier if their cycles are irregular or erratic or absent, or if they have really painful periods or heavy periods, any gynecologic issue that may be already diagnosed or not diagnosed yet should be checked out. And we shouldn't waste time ignoring those things and then saying, okay, now it's been a year, let me go get a checkup. I think it's really important to be proactive.
And I think that's so important for people to hear. I say the same thing when it comes to couples therapy. So I'm a relationship expert. Whatever, I have a book coming out, so I guess I'll just call myself an expert. And the idea of you don't have to be in crisis to go to couples therapy and work out some things. If you start feeling a concern, what's the harm? What's the hurt to go, hey, let's just check in with someone who knows a little more or has a different observation than we do. and maybe we are okay, and maybe we need a little help. And that's a good thing, versus when you start getting into crisis mode, it's a lot harder to pull it back and get to a normalcy than when you're before that stage. So I love the same perspective. Hey, why not? If you think something's off, what's the harm in going to your doctor? You would do that for anything else, hopefully, right? If you feel something off, you're getting headaches all the time, you're not going to be like, well, it's fine, and then you just can't function. You're not going to wait till you can't get out of bed. Something's wrong, or you're going to start going and asking your questions. That's all you're doing, is just making sure, asking questions. And when you look at couples, right, I felt that one of the reasons my wife and I have such a strong marriage is unfortunately because of our experience with infertility. It bonded us. It made us strong, that we rely on each other emotionally, but it can make or break a couple. What are some of the suggestions you might have as seeing it on the ground with some of the ways that men can support women and women can support men through the process of this journey and battlefield?
I'm so glad you asked that. Something very unique about my book is that there's a huge mental health emphasis, not just at the end, but throughout every chapter, because I think the mental health journey of male fertility versus having PCOS and finding that frustrating, or needing to rely on surrogacy or a donor egg, all of those are very nuanced, challenges, and have different mental health blocks that I help patients work through. But at the end of the book, I actually have a mental health toolkit. And one of the aspects of the toolkit provides very concrete examples, if you're in a couple, how to, prompts to use and how to communicate and things to really be mindful of. I'd say one of the biggest sources of conflicts when I'm treating couples who are maybe not on the same page, or, they're finding that this is a source of stress on their relationship, is that they have mismatched coping styles. And what I mean when I say this is everyone reacts to stress differently. Some people will kind of become insular and shut down and not really want to talk about it, whereas another person may need to talk it out all the time. And when you have both people, in my field, it's unique to other fields of medicine in that there's really, oftentimes two people, not always, but oftentimes there are two people involved, and they're both kind of processing and grappling with diagnoses and, sometimes treatment outcomes that don't go as planned. And both people are entitled to react however they react, and I think that when they have mismatched coping styles, that can lead to a lot of misunderstanding and feeling like, oh my gosh, why is my partner not caring about this as much as I do? Or why aren't they supporting me? Well, maybe they're really struggling themselves. So I think that's a challenge. I think the idea that, now this process that should feel really natural and innate becomes kind of more medical and transactional, that can make romance take a seat on the back burner because everything feels very scheduled, and it can kind of take some of the magic out of the process. I think there's a lot of blame, or assigning self-blame and feeling like, oh, I can't believe I'm dragging us down because this is the problem with me. My tubes are blocked, or it's my sperm count that's low. And I think really having like a team approach and realizing you're a unit and not thinking about it as, it's my fault or his fault. I think that's really important, and ensuring that you're finding ways to connect outside of this journey. Don't make it your whole identity, and don't make your whole relationship about infertility, because life is for living. And while it may take sometimes months or years for some people to overcome, all the while your relationship does need maintenance and effort, and it's important to not take it for granted.
Oh, I love that last. I love everything you said, but the last part is super important, because when it becomes, and this would be anything you're struggling in life, it cannot be the defining factor of everything you do. Your life is more than just the struggle you have right now. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to connect. I know as a parent of two IVF babies, even with our, we feel so blessed and honored that at least we have two. We could have had zero. It doesn't mean that now we can't struggle as parents, right?
Yeah.
You can't be like, well, we are so blessed. We wouldn't have had kids, so why should we be upset? No, you're a parent. And when you're a parent, when you go on a date, you shouldn't be talking about the kids. You should be talking about each other, right? And connecting. It's the same thing with any issue. And I remember when I was in I started therapy up again when I started the infertility issues, when we were going through everything about 8 years ago. And I said, well, at least we don't have it as bad as that couple who has 10 years. And my therapist said, don't say that ever again.
Yeah.
And I said, what? He said, your issue is your issue. Your struggle is your struggle. Don't compare to someone else, even with the struggle. because
agree.
don't dismiss or diminish the struggle.
Yeah.
Be real with it. Not, well, at least it's not 10 years. No, you have a year and a half, 2 years. That sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Period.
Exactly.
And so I think
agree.
and I love that I knew you added that part to the book. It's why I want to talk to you. I know that you have this beautiful balance and hybrid, mindset, that it's not just one thing, but everything is connected. It's so important because you have to worry about how you are and how you're doing. Can we talk a little bit about how can other people be cognizant of emotions, right? Because, holidays, things are coming up, all that kind of stuff. We don't want to tiptoe and be like, oh, I can't talk about my kids because this person's struggling with fertility, or I don't know they're struggling with. How do we balance that as a family, as a society, where we're not trying to shove it in people's faces? It's just the reality of our lives, and that's your reality. How do we take that into account and kind of be cognizant of other people's emotional state when they're going through this stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I think the key is to avoid triggers. And don't think you are a trigger. I mean, everyone going through a challenge, whether it's infertility or anything else, recognizes that someone else around them being, in a situation where they're not struggling in that same area of life, it's not a personal slight or an insult. It may feel unfair, and it's okay to acknowledge that it is. But I think the key is for us to really be a little bit more mindful and compassionate as a society. Let's never ask people, hey, do you have kids? That might be a really triggering question. God, never ask anyone if they're pregnant. Never ask anyone, do you have kids? And I think that's a hard one for people because they're like, well, I'm just asking about their life. And I have found myself in conversations sometimes almost asking that. And it's like, as a fertility doctor, I've become so much more sensitive because you just never know what people are struggling with. Let them volunteer that information. If they have children and they're a huge part of their life and identity, it will come up naturally in the conversation. But I think it's best to not poke the bear when it comes to that question. And that's a hard one to work around because it can just seem to the conversation can gravitate towards that direction. I think if someone is, that they're partnered and they don't have children, don't ask them about their plans. You don't know if they've been struggling through infertility and they've already had like 7 failed transfers. You just don't know. And so I think don't ask questions and pry. Let people share what they're comfortable sharing. Do not rush to give unsolicited advice because that is often a human nature knee-jerk reaction to feel like we want to fix things and provide solutions and help. And you might think you're helping, but again, you don't know the whole context of their story. And sometimes it can come off just really tone deaf, and it can be something that is really harmful to the relationship and to the person that is maybe struggling. I think the key is show up, whether that's sending a text like, hey, if someone shares that they're doing something, they're going through their journey, you can check in on them, and you can also give them an out and say things like, hey, I'm just checking in. I know you had a procedure last week or you're going through treatment. I just want you to know I'm thinking of you. No pressure to even respond to this, but I just want you to know that I'm sending you positive vibes and I'm thinking of you. I think that goes a long way. If you are pregnant yourself and you're afraid to share this with a friend or a family member who is going through infertility, the worst thing you can do is keep them out of the loop because you think you're actually helping them. That makes them feel ostracized. It makes them feel really isolated, and it's really insulting and hurtful. So it's always best to share the information with them. You don't have to share it in a public forum with everyone else because you might want to give them space and time to react. But I think have a one-on-one conversation, and you can even acknowledge, hey, I know you're going through a lot, but I just want you to be aware, like, this is what's happening in my life. And, I'm here for you. I know that this can bring up a lot of different emotions. I think if you have a baby shower, be understanding. Don't not invite your friend because you think it's going to be triggering. Extend the invite, but give them an out, and just try to be really compassionate and think about how you would want people to talk to if you were them going through that.
Yeah, I love that. And something I would add is that when it comes to the support of someone going through fertility or through the treatments and procedures, other than texting, hey, how are you doing? And I'm thinking of you. If they open up to you about the process that they are going through, you can always ask a very simple question. How do you need support when you're going through this? What can I do for you? Versus worrying that you might do too much, you might overstep. Find out what they actually need. Ask them, like, hey, what does it look like? Do you want me to get groceries for you after you want to make dinner for you and your partner? Like, be active in that. And I love the idea of let them say no. Don't assume it's going to be a no. So if you invite someone, it's on them to say, hey, you know, I don't feel comfortable, and don't take offense, but you're not hiding the fact. I know when I was learning all these different things growing up through this process, really maturing as a human to understand what it's like to have the balance of hope and struggle. A couple that I got to know, they text their friends if you're going to be pregnant, like they know they're pregnant, they heard rumors, or even just some friends that are going through it. They were going through like 10 years. Now, this doesn't work for everyone. I'm not saying this is a good idea for everyone. They would say, can you email us or let us know that you're pregnant so that we have time to process it? And then when we see you, actually be happy versus the initial reaction of maybe a sting. It's because you deserve the happiness. You deserve our happy response because we love you. We're not upset at you for being pregnant. It just sucks that we haven't for 10 years. So it's that balance of setting boundaries to make sure you're being safe and careful. I have a few other questions. There's two more.
Yeah.
As someone, I wrote a book myself. There's a lot you'll learn. What are some of the things that you learned about yourself writing this book, The Lucky Egg? And what are some aha moments as a professional, as an expert, where you're like, oh, that's interesting information I didn't know before?
What did I learn about myself? I learned that I like to elaborate because I had to keep my word count ideally, at 100K or less. And that was a challenge for me. But I do think, not sure how I did it, because I really felt insistent on including everything. I didn't want to write 3 different books and have, again, the information fragmented. I really wanted like what feels like a fertility Bible, like something that everyone can find something useful in this book, regardless of where they're at in their journey and what the situation may be. And I wanted to make it super accessible and easy to understand. But with that comes the need for a lot of explanation. And so I think that's one thing I learned about myself is I continue to work on trying to package complex information in small, digestible bites. And I think it's a really important skill, whether you're, dispelling a myth on the media, like on the news, you have like 2 minutes to do that, right? Sometimes you're talking about really complicated issues, or even just meeting patients where they're at. I talk to so many different patients and they have a varying degree of a knowledge gap that, they need to be brought up to speed. So I think I just continued to learn more about my communication style and how to be as efficient with words as possible, which I think is actually helpful in a lot of different areas of life, but particularly in patient care and just trying to be a science communicator.
I love that.
I think in terms of things I didn't know, there might have been like some topics where this finally forced me to do the deep dive. It's like, I knew the answer. I knew the answer. Like there's a whole section on add-ons because there's so many of these like experimental add-ons that people are always like, is this legit? What is this? Is it scientifically based? And I know the answer because I've done the work and the research. But I think delving deep into some of the data that is really poor quality, not great, especially on like certain supplements and things like that. I think this was the first time I truly did the deepest dive, because you have to when you're writing a book. And even though the answer was the same, I think just like understanding the background even deeper and really combing through some of the really poorly designed studies that have been used as, the pedestal to prop certain interventions or tests up that don't really have a good basis. Understanding that on a deeper level so that I could really make sense of it and help other people understand how to wade through all the noise and cancel out the noise and focus on the things that are actually important. Not just because of wasted time, but also wasted resources. I want to make sure people are really concentrating their efforts and their resources on things that are going to actually help them. And there's a lot of ways people can get sidetracked from point A to point B. And I think it's if we leave people to their own devices and don't provide the necessary education and don't close the knowledge gap, that's the danger, is that people can veer off the path that's actually most likely to help them.
Yeah, for sure. I have 2 more questions.
Sure.
What is because with internet nowadays and social media, and everyone feels that because they have a microphone, they have an opinion and it actually matters. What's some of the craziest or wackiest advice or things you've seen on the internet about fertility and what helps or what, to be scared about?
I think one of the worst pieces of advice are people being told, stop what you're doing with your doctor, and before you start treatment, take 6 months, do this cleanse, take these supplements. It's this idea that there's a formula and you can will away your fertility issues. I think that's terrible advice, especially for people who are already dealing with time sensitivity. Everyone's dealing with time sensitivity, right? Most of my patients want to be pregnant yesterday. But also, if they're going on to a treatment like IVF, I don't want to work with less eggs that they inevitably may have available 6 months from now, or the quality changing in favor of things that aren't proven to actually change anything or move the needle. So, it's a fine balance. It's like, yes, I know that insulin resistance is a physical problem that can predispose someone to having not as good of an outcome as they could have had. So yes, there is an element of, if we identify that there are problems and targets to treat, let's optimize. But that might be for like a month or two leading up to the cycle, not 6.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like a crazy one that you see all the time. There are a lot of made up problems that don't actually exist, like adrenal fatigue, estrogen dominance. These are terms that get thrown around a lot. And I view them as made up problems with made up solutions. And it's often harnessed to sell people things that they don't need.
Yeah.
So that's another crazy thing, because I'm like, it's insane to me that anyone could just kind of use their platform to spread, fear about something that's not really something that I'm thinking about at all as a reproductive endocrinologist with years of experience.
Yeah. It's like the Liver King who says that if you have, every male has low testosterone, so eat testicles because that's what refills it. And it's like,
wow. Yes.
And then he pushes and he goes, and by the way, here's a supplement and my protein shake. It's like, oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
The last question, which is more of a heartfelt question, is for anyone listening who's in the depth of fertility struggles and battle, what is one or two things that you would want them to hear from the leading expert with this amazing book, The Lucky Egg, so they can kind of take it to heart and to home in their life today?
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, and I think I said this earlier, infertility is not your fault. So, it's not something that you did or didn't do. This is largely something out of people's control. It's okay to feel grief about it. It's okay to feel heartbroken. And it's also okay to feel proud of yourself and how far you've come, even if you haven't gotten to your end goal. It's still, you're showing up and you're trying, and that deserves acknowledgement. Don't tie your worth to your fertility. Your body is not a failure just because you're struggling with this one area of life. And, your identity, who you are as a person, goes way beyond your fertility. And, know your self-worth. You are worth care, self-care, compassion, and hope. And, you are worthy as you are right now. You don't need getting pregnant or having a family to be something that defines your worth.
I love that. So important for people to hear. Where people find your information, your book, learn and get this beautiful piece of work in their hands for them to have something to learn from, hold on to, and give them guidance.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is available as of mid-January. It comes out January 13th. Available wherever books are sold. There's an audiobook as well, available Spotify, Apple, everywhere. And you can find the book on Amazon. You can pre-order it now. Pre-orders are very helpful because they help stores and, all of the companies recognize, okay, this is a book that's in high demand. We're going to stock our shelves with it. And my goal in writing this, really and truly, I already have a day job. I did this because I see the need. And my hope is that this will be something that people view as like health class 2.0. And everyone will read it, regardless of whether they're actively trying or just, want to understand how their body works. I hope people read it before they even start trying, before they get off of birth control, because I think when you know all the things, you're going to feel less anxious and you're going to feel more in control. And that's important because so much of this process and our biology is something that's so completely out of our control. So just having that knowledge to feel calm and less anxious is going to allow you to move through this journey and feel more in control and make good decisions and not be swayed off of your path by things that aren't going to serve you, and will help you find the help that you need. And I think in the world where there's so much misinformation and noise and people trying to sell you things, I'm excited about a book because I just feel like This is not an AI generated book, right? Like this is a physical book that you can read, and it's coming from a true expert that has helped thousands of people navigate infertility. And that's advice you can trust.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show and the work that you're doing. I know you are helping so many people, and you are such an inspiration for so many people going through the struggle. And I cannot wait for people to read it. Really, I appreciate your time today. It really means a lot.
Thank you so much.
Follow now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and finally, see me on YouTube at The Dude Therapist.